Welcome to the audiobook on gcloud, Google Cloud's powerful command line tool for interacting with Google Cloud services. In this guide, we'll explore some of the most commonly used gcloud commands along with practical examples. From setting up your environment to managing resources like virtual machines, storage, and networking, gcloud commands can help streamline your workflow. Setting up your environment. Install the SDK. Use Cloud Init to initialize and configure your project, logging in and setting default parameters. Use gcloud auth login to log in into Google Cloud Platform. Setting the default project. Use the following command to set a default project for all future gcloud commands. gcloud config set project _ID example. gcloud config set project my sample project. List projects accessible by the active account. gcloud projects list. Example. gcloud projects list sort by equals project id limit equals 5. To set the zone property in the compute section, run gcloud config set compute /zone _name. To disable prompting for scripting, run gcloud config set disable _prompts true. To set a proxy with the appropriate type, and specify the address and port on which to reach it, run gcloud config set proxy /type http. gcloud config set proxy /address 1.234.56.78. gcloud config set proxy /port 8080. To change account, gcloud config set account. Managing compute resources. Creating a virtual machine. To create a new compute engine instance, gcloud compute instances create instance _name zone equals zone machine type equals machine _TIP example. gcloud compute instances create my instance zone equals us central 1A machine type equals N1 standard 1. Listing all instances. To see a list of your compute engine instances, gcloud compute instances list. Starting and stopping instances. Starting an instance. gcloud compute instances start instance _name zone equals zone stopping an instance. gcloud compute instances stop instance _name zone equals zone example. gcloud compute instances stop my instance zone equals us central 1A. Managing cloud storage. Creating a bucket. To create a new storage bucket, gcloud storage buckets create /bucket _name. Example, gcloud storage buckets create // my new bucket. Uploading files. To upload files to your cloud storage bucket, gcloud storage cp local _file _path // bucket _name. Example, gcloud storage cp my file.txt // my new bucket. Listing bucket contents. To list objects within a bucket, gcloud storage ls // bucket _name. IAM and permissions. 1. Listing all IAM policies. To view the IAM policy for a project, gcloud projects get IAM policy project _ID. Example, gcloud projects get IAM policy my sample project. 2. Adding a role to a user. To grant a user a role, gcloud projects add IAM policy binding project _ID member equals user _. Email role equals role _name example. gcloud projects add IAM policy binding my sample project member equals user example at example.com role equals role/viewer. Managing Kubernetes clusters. 1. Creating a GKE cluster. To create a Google Kubernetes Engine, GKE, cluster, gcloud container clusters create cluster _name a, zone equals zone, num nodes equals node _count example. gcloud container clusters create my cluster, zone equals us central 1A, num nodes equals 32. Connecting to a GKE cluster. To set up kubectl access to a GKE cluster, gcloud container clusters get credentials cluster _name zone equals zone 3. Scaling a cluster. To adjust the node count of a GKE cluster, gcloud container clusters resize cluster _name. Node pool equals default pool, num nodes equals new _node _count 4. Describing clusters. To list existing clusters in all locations, run gcloud container clusters list. To describe an existing cluster, run gcloud container clusters describe sample cluster. Viewing Kubernetes configuration. Kubectl config view displays the current kubectl settings, showing clusters, contexts, and user configurations. Kubectl config current context shows the current context that kubectl is using. Working with contexts. List all contexts. Kubectl config get contexts lists all the contexts available in the kubectl config. Set a context. Kubectl config use context name switches to the specified context. Delete a context. kubectl config delete context name, deletes the specified context from the kubect config. Working with namespaces. List namespaces. Kubectl get namespaces or kubectl get ns, lists all available namespaces. Set the default namespace. Kubectl config set context current namespace equals namespace name sets the default namespace for the current context. Run a command in a specific namespace. Add n namespace name to the kubectl command to operate within a specific namespace. For example, kubectl get pods n namespace name. Create a namespace. Kubectl create namespace name, creates a new namespace. Delete a namespace. Kubectl delete namespace name, deletes the specified namespace and all resources within it.